So, let me start over here on the right. We have Jean-Marie Leroux from Thales, and his experience really is on a global basis, running that cybersecurity division within the company. And I think you said you have about 450 people globally working?
Yes.
Okay, so very strong sort of business and global perspective. Turning now to Shira Kaplan. Shira, you come from really the opposite end of the spectrum in a way, working in a business which you founded.
Correct.
You started, you're growing, which has come out of a very different background, Israeli military, and is one of a numerous, we've discovered, cluster of businesses that are thriving in the cybersecurity area in Israel. Have I got that right?
You've got it exactly right.
Good. Over here on my left, and I'm going to make sure I get this right, because we were just joking about this earlier. We have Bia, who comes from KPMG. And one of the great things that Bia's bringing to the conversation is actually a very broad knowledge of both consulting across a number of different organizations, specifically in cybersecurity, and a depth of knowledge of 18, 20 years, if I don't get it wrong?
Just over 20.
Just over 20 years in the financial services sector. And then on the left, last but absolutely not least, we've got Constance from the Internet Society. And the Internet Society is really known, I think, for being a champion right from the very, very outset, with some very well-known individuals who are right there at the start of the Internet, championing an open Internet, obviously. And Constance is responsible, amongst other things, for governance within that. So some very different perspectives. I'm Julia Harrison, and I'm going to try and keep some order. So why don't we just jump straight in? I think you'll all have seen, and I'm sure sort of experienced every day, the amount of attention and growing interest around cyber. We all see the news about the threats. We see the growing costs that are daily being incurred. I think, what was the figure? Trillions anyway, in terms of remediation, penalties, business cost, lost business cost. And so what we really wanted to start off with was, some broader thoughts about, with all this going on, with everybody looking to understand this quite complex area, how should we really think about this area strategically? What's going on? What's the bigger picture? So Jean-Marie, why don't we start?
Yes, thank you, Julia. Maybe just to start, I would like to share a few figures with you to set the scene. Total number of attacks in France last year, per company, 29. This is the identified cyber attacks, 29, twice as much as the year before. First figure. Second figure, average cost of a cyber attack in terms of direct cost, it's 20 million. And indirect cost, 100 times more. Okay? So we could say cybersecurity or cyber attack, it's a burden, it's a cost. But what we would like to invite you is to consider it as an investment in the future. What for? Because to secure your IT, your networks, your company, the average investment level is around 4 million. So if you compare this 4 million investment to the total cost of the cyber attacks, 20 million, up to 100 times more, what we would like to say is that please do consider cybersecurity as an investment into a secure and digital future. So this is my main message. It's just let us prepare a safe and cyber-secure future in new technology.
And Bia, you had some thoughts around that?
So I'll probably take a slightly different tact. So Jean-Marie gave a figure. The thing that really worries me, cybercrime is big business. It's about 450 billion a year. Now, that's massive business. Julia mentioned they've been in the industry a very long time. So when I started as security professionals, we were worried about hackers, we were worried about insider threats. But what's really, I guess, scary is over the last 10 years is cybercrime. Now, for me, the key message is this is no longer about security professionals. This affects every single one of us here. everything we do is connected. All industries are connected. So if I look at the industry I cover, financial services, so banks as an example, they can no longer just look at their own organizations, and that's a lot of work in itself, but they also have to look at payment backbone services that they rely on. They have to look at third parties and suppliers that they work with. And more importantly, they have to look at the customers that they service. So for me, the message is this is a massive change in mindset going into the future of how we handle security.
And
Sure.
if I can pick up on that, Bia, you know, if we're looking at the dark web, how many of you are familiar with what the dark web is? Not enough people. So the dark web is actually a restricted access network, not the internet, but something that is below the internet, which you can only access by downloading special software. And usually when you download that software, you're probably on the border of being a cyber criminal, because the dark web is where all the crime, illegal activity, trafficking is taking place. And this is where your passwords, your stolen passwords are being traded, executive information is being traded on hacker forums, and so on and so forth. And to me, a very disturbing statistics, which is exactly what Bia was insinuating on the rise of cybercrime, is the fact that from January to July this year, we had a growth of from 1.5 million people to 2 million people downloading that software. So over 30% increase in the number of people who are connecting to the darknet. That means that normal people who are just looking for jobs in desperate kind of economies, are starting to join this cyber crime economy, which is growing at a very, very fast speed. So just a side point on what you were saying, which is very disturbing.
Constance?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think colleagues have set the ground very nicely. We see there's a real urgency on cybersecurity. Some of the businesses, most of them, are now conscious of the risk and aware of the necessity to invest. I would like, however, perhaps to emphasize that if we really want to have a change of mindset, it's also going to take a new kind of methodology. If you take the example, for instance, of data breaches, we know that in 2016, basically the cost was $4 billion US. We know this cost is going to increase. The reality is that the cost lays on the shoulders mostly of the users, of the consumers, of customers who rely on IT industry. And unless we have a system where the cost is going to lie on the shoulders of the industry, I don't think we'll see some change. So I think, and at the Internet Society, we've just launched a report on the future of the Internet, and we're offering a set of recommendations. And one of them is really a call to industries to think about the ethical dimension of the services, the products they're putting out there at a very early stage. And not think simply about their mitigation risk, immediate risk, but have a long-term strategy, a long-term investment strategy in terms of cybersecurity, as Jean-Marie was mentioning.
So if those give us some sort of broad outlines about, you know, the changing picture and the way we should start thinking broadly about cyber and the level of attention actually that we need to give to this area, what are the sort of psychological barriers, if you like, to paying that level of attention? What are the sorts of things that, you know, we need to think about both in terms of the employee and in terms of organizations?
Yeah, and the most important part here is that the employee is the organization, because each one of us is a gateway into our organizations. We cannot just think about ourselves as, you know, standalone people. We are connected to the networks of our organizations. So that bear that in mind. The biggest psychological barrier is that people think about security or cybersecurity as a burden. And you know, if you talk to engineers or software engineers or you know, anybody working on site and producing something, you know, you talk to them about security and they just tell you, hey, back off. You're interrupting me in developing like the next big thing, right? I'm an engineer. I want to create. You're just you're stopping me from creating and innovating. And that is the big question of cybersecurity, because how do you make these people, how do you educate them to accept cybersecurity as a layer within their development? And remember that if you add security too late or later in the development stage, it would cost you up to 100 times more than if you do it in the beginning. So, yeah, I mean, the point is that I think we need to think about cybersecurity first, and I'll kind of propone that message over and over again, but this is just but I'm Israeli, I'm paranoid to begin with. So.
I think it does. I think it actually chimes with everything that the panel was saying, even though we have these very different perspectives, because you were saying the same thing, John.
Definitely in line with what you said. What we witness is that first reaction, cybersecurity requirements, it's a nightmare, it's a burden, it's an additional cost. And you think about mindset. What do we need to do to change the mindset is to convince the people, from employee to CXO, and this is also your role, that we can transform these requirements into a competitive advantage. If you develop an IoT or a connected car or a traffic management system which is cyber secured by design, it's just like you prepare something robust for the future. Is like we take a very simple image in Japan or in the Caribbean island, in front of earthquake or hurricane, the building who has been designed with anti-seismic infrastructures are very robust and will be resilient. This is exactly the same for cybersecurity systems. If you design your IT, your information system, all your digital transformation program with cybersecurity inside, you prepare in front of a digital hurricane.
So, well, Bia, Constance, come on, join into the conversation.
Well, thank you very much. I see you started your question with what are basically the psychological barriers we have, and I think you know, building on colleagues' comments here, I see three things that really need to be tackled. First of all, the mindset of the leadership of organizations, all organizations, and I'm not just talking about IT, ICT industry, because all the industries now are affected by ICTs. So one point, cybersecurity should be a strategic consideration for the C-suite. And I think this is a strong message at the Women's Forum, since we have more and more women in leadership positions. Secondly, it was said everybody should be concerned by cybersecurity. At the Internet Society, we have an initiative called the Online Trust Alliance that shows, there was some figures, I think 18 months ago, saying that basically 90%, for instance, of data breaches could have been avoided. And 29% were due to human factors, human errors. So this really says something about education, training, and the fact that cybersecurity needs to be an issue, a concern for everybody in the chain of any industry. And third point, third barrier I think we need to address and definitely tackle is the educational issue. There's data out there showing, for instance, that in the US, cybersecurity positions, 40% are not filled because the skills are simply not out there. And perhaps one of the ways to address that is also to reach to new audiences, new talents, including women and girls. We know that they're very limited portion represented in curriculum in terms of IT and cybersecurity. So that would also be a strong message for the Women's Forum.
So is the proportion of girls and women in cyber sort of in line with the same levels that we have in technology, low levels that we have in technology generally? Is that a similar picture?
Unfortunately, I would say it's even worse. So we are struggling to find women with great competencies and also motivated to join cyber. So we will hire, and we will multiply by 2 the percentage of women in the new hiring for the next 2 years within Thales. But it's a day-to-day contest to seduce the best talent, so it's a call also.
You can't find them. It's hard to
No,
find
we
them.
can't.
I want to bring Beering. She's been waiting patiently, and then Shira, we'll come back to you.
Sorry, I'm just going to go back one step. I think the point to support what you're saying is, so for me, there is something about demystifying cyber and security. And going back to the point, you were saying about education. Now, if I take the UK as an example, so businesses generally relied on security professionals to secure the business. Then the UK government and various regulators were really raising the profile of cyber to the extent that actually all boards now get cyber is important. However, where I see the gap, and this is why this is a fantastic forum, is the business translation. So the board gets cyber's big, important, and they're responsible and accountable. You've got the technology and security professionals know what they're doing to a great extent, but the business in the middle doesn't understand what the cyber threat means to the business. And actually that's the biggest gap and biggest challenge. So you as business leaders, that's your role to help improve that awareness.
Is this something that sort of chimes with you in the audience? I mean, I'm wondering, maybe the question is, what brought you all to this session today? What is it about cyber that is interesting, key to your organisation, etc.? Maybe this lady over here. Perhaps just give your name and organisation.
It should be on, yeah. So my name's Trisha De Bodrov, and I'm a journalist and column writer for different organisations. I'm here not so much as a representative of a company, but as a private citizen, because I think we are now, all of us, living in these 2 parallel worlds. We have the physical world here, and if someone hits you over the head, you know what to do about that. There's police, there's recourse, whatever. And then we're all then living the alternative world, which we're highly reliant on and totally dependent on, and there is no recourse there. So therefore I'm here. But every time I go to one of these sessions and I ask a question, 2 people in the session will answer differently. I mean, it is a very evolving thing. Not many people know. So 2 things. One, do you think that it's time that, for example, when you say everybody has to take this very seriously, do you think the big, kids on the block, such as Apple in terms of encryption, everything else, Facebook in terms of what they're putting out, etc., should stop thinking themselves as the sort of sexy young people on the block and having everybody on their side, and they are now part of the, I would say, the digital establishment, and so that seems to be missing in the equation. They're doing a lot, but not enough, perhaps. And also, I also asked, and please give me your opinion. Are we all heading down this road of that if we own a device or something that has access to internet, does that lead to, like owning your own home, that you have to take out insurance, in which case are we going to have a greater disparity between those people who can afford really good insurance and those who can't? And when I asked this question at a panel, that one said, no, this should be a governmental thing, and the other one said yes. So your thoughts, please, on all that. Sorry to go on.
No, that's good. 2 great questions, actually. Anybody else want to put any questions or we'll come straight to those. Over here, just take this question as well. Lady with the white scarf.
Hi, my name is Mary DuPont Medina. Sorry.
Speak up a little, we couldn't quite hear.
Okay. I actually sit on 2 boards of companies. I'm a French-American national. I sit on a board of 2 companies, and they asked me to come onto the board because, obviously for quota reasons, but also because I understand technology. I actually worked at Thales for 19 years. And one of the problems is getting them to talk about it at the board level, because first of all, IT is a problem by definition. They don't understand IT. They don't understand the cloud. They hear all these buzzwords. A lot of them don't even use technology or use it, in a certain way. So if you can't even talk about IT, then the question of cyber, okay, they've heard it, but they tell you, no, that's the audit committee. They look at risk. So they want to bury it in the audit committee, where I agree with you. I think it's much bigger than the audit committee. And by getting them to have the discussion on the table, I think it would help them to understand their business and what is at stake at their business, and not having it as an IT discussion. But so what would be your advice is how do you get it out of the audit committee and onto the main board agenda?
Okay, so 3 really interesting questions there. We've got what's the role going forward of the now more mature social media platforms? What responsibilities do they need to take in this whole picture? How does it affect us as citizens, really? Or is it going to move towards a sort of polarized society with haves and have-nots in terms of, what can be done to protect yourself in the circumstances? And then how do we get the discussion into a broader strategic business discussion at board level, as opposed to buried in a particular audit committee or IT discussion? So who wants to? Shira, go on then.
I love your question. So the easiest way to get the board involved is to do a demo to the board of how within 5 minutes their computers can be taken over. If you want to wake them up, this is the fastest way to wake the board. And we've done this in some cases. Not everybody loves it, but it works. The other way, which I've seen in actually one of the biggest publicly traded companies in Israel, I won't mention the name, but it's a great company, traded on the NASDAQ, and what they have is a very creative Chief Information Security Officer, a CISO, who's responsible for cybersecurity. And he is just the most innovative guy, going out with like campaigns to employees, to the board, having like these cool videos of how to, he's like taking security to a place which is really fun and is not a burden. And I think when you have someone like this in the organization who doesn't think about security in a boring way, but really thinks about this as a mission, right, to secure the organization, he or she, ideally she, will definitely draw the attention of the board. So in the end, it's about people, right? And who do you kind of give this task to, who will drive or raise the attention?
Constance?
Yeah, I'm happy to react to the question. I think the first question we had, I think it was really important. And I heard perhaps some concerns and this idea that we're going towards a future that is full of threats. And to your question about how do we get all organizations concerned, it is our perspective that actually organizations and C-suites are now taking the issue quite seriously. The question for them is rather, how do they address the issue and the lack of skills and the lack of strategy? So I would say there's hope there, because definitely I think there's acknowledgement of the need to do something, and we've reached a stage where it's about, okay, what do we do? What is the strategy and the management implications that derive from that decision?
Do you believe that's true, Constance, for all types of company, including the specific social media platforms?
I would say that it's probably them, the first ones, interested and who have the expertise to think about the legal and commercial implications. It's less natural for other traditional types of industries that are now impacted by the internet. But what I also wanted to say is that I think there's some positive trends out there. First of all, there's appetite from consumers to understand what is the trust value in products. And it would be my guess that in a few years from now, we will have, when buying a product, some sort of tag, some sort of information that gives some security level, some comfort, some trust to the consumer. So the second trend we're seeing, and I think, again, that very good intervention, is the trend in terms of insurance. It would also be my guess that in 4 to 5 years from now, you will have insurance policies that reward good behavior, not only from consumers, but also from the industry. And that's going to be a very, very serious incentive. So there is hope.
So that actually could a positive sort of trend in terms of insurance rather than a additional cost or divisive measure in a way. You're saying that, you know, if you or at least there's a positive side of rewarding good behavior as opposed to.
I think there are positive energies in place right now at a point in time where there's full acknowledgement of the importance and the critical threat that we have. So I think we're at a good place.
Okay. And Bia, you wanted to?
So I was just going to come back to you on the question about the board. So again, if I go back to some of the clients I work with, generally there's an interest, generally there's an appetite. The challenge they have is they don't know what questions to ask, and then they don't know what action they're supposed to take, and the information that they get doesn't help them do that. So a lot of them are concerned about regulators because they have to respond or to react to regulators on a frequent basis. Some of on the practical side, some of the uptake recently has been doing on cyber scenarios. So it's going back to Shira's point about a little bit of fun. So, and these are serious scenarios that one, they probably hadn't anticipated that would happen. And then two, is just living the moment and seeing, should that scenario happen, how would they actually react? Are they talking to the right people? Can they get access to the right information? And it makes it a little bit more alive. And then it actually also helps the firm in starting to get the right information in the first place to feed to the board, to then be able to ask the right questions.
I just would like to complete with some examples. We are in cybersecurity in Thales since 15 years. During years, we tried to sell security. We sell security. Then we switch. We said, okay, we are here for business purpose. And when discussing with boards, we say, okay, let's consider that we will not make the marketing of fear. Let's consider we speak about securing your digital transformation. Digital transformation is all about deploying the right new technologies, IoT, cloud, mobile, networks, big data, to transform your company. So when you talk to your CXO, to the C-suite, okay, they can hear very easily this kind of speech about generating new value. And then what we say that if you do not secure this technology that sustain your transformation, then you may be exposed to new vulnerability. So your transformation program might be weak or exposed to new cyber threats. One example, IoT is there to generate data, transfer the data, and then you do big data analytics, and you take decision to modify your process, your value proposition, or whatsoever. If in this value chain there is somewhere a cyber attack that corrupt the data, all the decision process that you will take will be wrong. So you need to make sure that you secure all the technology that sustain your transformation program. And if you go to your board with this kind of discussion, with kind of demonstration, rather than doing the marketing of fear, I guess the CXO will be much more aware. First point. Second point for the all the digital players and internet giants. I confirm that these companies are very much invested and aware of the cyber threats. We work for most of them. We are one of their partners in providing them with data protection solutions, for example. And I can testify that people like all the GAFA, from Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, they are very, very much involved and at a level of very high level of mastering the cybersecurity issue. So they consider it very seriously with partners or alone, in standalone. And I think they are already preparing the fact that the B2C products that they put on the market will be secure for the end users.
Should we just, there's another question here, so I'll come to you in just a second. I just want to tease out a little bit more about what you said about the IoT, because it's obviously a really kind of, as things become more interconnected, I guess that the risk spreads and grows, and you need to have a more holistic approach to looking at that whole kind of the possible solutions. Am I correct? I'm the stupid one on this panel asking questions that I, So what are the implications from that, and how is that going to evolve going forward?
Just in one sentence, the simple answer is that we see a convergence between the virtual world and the physical world. So whatever we think of as, a virtual kind of, let's take it differently. If we're thinking about an energy facility or a nuclear facility, which we once thought, okay, this is disconnected, this is not going to ever end up in harming human lives. Today's scenario is that energy facilities, nuclear facilities can be taken over by attackers, and the rest will be history. So this is what we talk about as the convergence between the cyber and the physical world.
We can give an easy to understand example like IoT, so Internet of Things, connected devices. A connected car or autonomous vehicle is an IoT, industrial one. One very concrete example, but we have done. A funny one. Intruder can take control of your music system into the car and play with the sound level of the car to demonstrate that we have control. Funny one. More concerning one, we can also, through the communication system, take control of the brakes or the steering system. Not so funny. Safety is at risk there.
Very clear. Constance?
Yeah, so I think that the panel has done a very good job in emphasizing the risks ahead of us, but there are also some business opportunities and economic and social growth opportunities that go with the development of IoT. We have 5 billion devices today that are connected. We're planning to have, I think, 50 billion in about 3 years, and that tells you a lot in terms of the concerns, the challenges in terms of privacy. Everything will be connected, not just your device and your PC at home, but your toothbrush, your perhaps your clothes, your car, definitely. But beyond that, so what do we do? And I think this really leads to how we kickstarted the conversation today, the need for collaboration, the need for having a more holistic approach. If again, you take the example of Internet of Things, and you think about the complexity of the ecosystem and the number of actors between the designer, between the manufacturer, between the seller, the business entity, between the customer, it gives you the entire chain that needs to be secured, because in the field of IoT, you are safe only as strong as your weakest link, I would say. I hope that's clear. And this also gives us an indication of the different steps and levels that need to be addressed and comprised in any global, I would say, strategy. The other thing to think about is the lifespan of devices. We know that people, they keep their old iPhone, they keep their old devices, and when you think about securing the chain, it's not just when you sell the item, it's also thinking about in 2-3 years, in 4 years, in 5 years. You need to think about the updates, you need to think about the patches, you need to think about a way where the customer will be able to, in an easy way, cooperate with you to ensure that the entire chain, the entire environment remains secure. So a lot of thinking to do.
Bia, you wanted to comment?
So the only thing I was going to add to this, actually there is a silver lining, because as much as the risks are evolving, there's lots of great technologies also out there. There's lots of people thinking about this in the right way. I think for me it goes back to being connected. You can't do anything in isolation. So if you've got a great business idea, that's fabulous, and that's where the world's moving to. There's no point and there's no reason to stop that. But it means then through your whole process, through your whole marketing, through your whole business process, through your whole technology, your people, you're making sure that that security built-in is built throughout. So the risk is there, but I think we're doing great things in the industry. The only other thing I'd say in terms of a mindset change, is in organizations, we tend to work in silos, in functions. Now, criminals don't think that way, and they're not limited by those boundaries. So again, we need to step out a little bit of our way of thinking and think, if I was somebody to take advantage of this, how would I be thinking about it? Criminals are also lazy. You know, they'll try and attack the quickest thing that would give them return on their investment. If it's too hard to do, they'll move somewhere else. So effectively, you just need to make it a little bit harder so that you're not the target.
There was one question, I think. Yeah.
In fact, I have a very practical question. In our company, I think we are aware of what happened. We try to be aware of what happened on cybercrime, but we said, okay, we can't know all what can happen. So we decided to have an insurance contract, and so we have had some insurance companies to propose us some services. And then the time comes to know what cover we need. And to be honest, we were in a difficulty to know what could be the costs of a cyber attack. And okay, we say, okay, we take the average insurance product that is on the table. But do you have any, I don't know, advice on that, how to have the correct or the adequate insurance cover? Because some insurance company, most of them, they don't know yet. They have some figures. But then to apply to your own company, what can be the risk? They don't have statistics that it can be for the other line of business. So I think something around that. I don't know
how to assess the impact, the cost on your business,
and how to find and to buy the correct insurance cover.
Understood. Any quick thoughts on that?
Very quickly, what I would recommend is do a risk assessment, identify the weakness points in your system, then concentrate on the one or two scenario of attacks, like if an intruder gets by this way, using this vulnerability, what can be the impact, and then you, with your finance department, you do a quotation of the valuation that you could lose. Then it's a scenario of the total, what we call a TCI, total cost of incident of a cyber attack, but we can discuss later on if you want.
Shira, anybody else? We've got just 2 minutes left.
No, I mean, a cyber maturity assessment test, I mean, goes in line with that. I think that's the right approach.
Okay. The only thing I would add to that, right, it's not just a point in time. So there is a point in time, but there is something about, we've talked about maturity, right, and it's continuing to manage that, because otherwise it will be a false sense of security as well.
Yeah, I would just add, I think, very shortly, bring the CITO to the grown-ups table. That person should be part of the C-suite, and definitely some of the things we're seeing in our interactions with various businesses is that the audits and systematic procedures are not in place. The concern is there, the awareness is there, but the implementation and the strategy isn't quite there.
So for your closing thought from the discussion and from what you would take as the most important thing to advise the audience?
Perhaps if we want to elevate a bit the conversation and being here at the Women's Forum, I think there really is a leadership issue, not only in acknowledging cybersecurity as a topic for leaders today, and also implementing a strategy in cooperation with other sectors, other actors, civil society, governments, and definitely I think this is a leadership issue.
I agree, totally.
Any other thoughts, or that's really the key thing for you?
So for me, that's the key thing, and I keep going back to the same point. This is about understanding and demystifying, and actually it's basic common sense. We do it in every other field that we work in or in our daily lives, so it's just applying that mindset.
So don't be frightened, demystify, ask the stupid questions, and that way we'll understand.
Totally, and deal with it, and it will mature with time.
To me, it's not just about leadership, it's about general cyber awareness and cyber literacy. And if you ask your CEO what the dark web is, or your board members, and they don't know what it is, they have to be trained, and you should worry. So educate yourself.
I would say as a conclusion, it's also a big opportunity for all of you. we could not find the right competencies, the right leadership, especially with women talents. So for us, it's a real opportunity to recruit, but also to partner with new companies, new startups. We are the major partner of Station F for cybersecurity. We coach 10 cybersecurity startups every 6 months. So it's also a call for please dare to invest, dare to create new companies, invest in cyber, and partner with big players like us.
So it's great to end on an optimistic note. I think, as you say, the panel has said, people tend to see this always in terms of risk. And whilst that's undoubtedly immense and something that we really need to understand, it also seems as though there are great opportunities both for leadership and both for individuals to work in the area. So thank you all. Thanks for your questions and for joining the session. Hope you have a good conference for the rest of the time. Thanks to the panel.